Good morning. I am Jackie Toops, a writer with ArmyWife101.com, and today we have a very special guest. I would like you to please welcome Barb Allen. Thank you so much for
Good
joining.
morning. I just kicked my laptop stand. There we go.
Well, while you readjust, it's my pleasure to introduce you because there's so much you have got going on. So Barbara is a very special guest. She is a Gold Star wife. She is an author. She's a national speaker, a veterans advocate, and co-founder of American Snippets. And so we've got a lot to talk about today because you have endured so much and you have triumphed over tragedy and you've found a voice and you've used this platform and now you're helping other people. You're helping veterans. You're helping other widows who have had to suffer the same sacrifice and loss. And I think that your strength is just so incredibly inspiring. And I want to give just a quick little background on what happened. In 2005, Barb's husband, Lieutenant Lewis Allen, deployed to Iraq, and within 72 hours, he was gone. He was murdered by a fellow American soldier, and Barb was left to pick up the pieces, raise 4 young boys all by herself, endure a lengthy court-martial case, and somehow figure out how she was going to put one foot in front of the other each day while being a voice for her husband and being there to retain his memory for her boys. So I just really can't wait to hear you share your story and tell us how you did it. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I love what you guys are doing. It's great. So right back at you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I love what you're doing too. And I can't wait to learn more. I actually got a couple of Barb's books she just sent to me the other day. One is Front Toward Enemy, and lucky me, you signed them. Thank you so much. Whoops, there we go. And her other book is How to Woo a Widow. So you have managed to do so much for yourself. I feel like whereas you could have just kind of rolled over and just quit, you didn't. So I want to talk today about if you can kind of take us back a little bit. Tell me what was life like before you lost your husband? Can you kind of paint a picture?
Yeah, it was about as normal as it can be when you have all those tiny children. You know, they were 6, 5, 3, and 1, and they were all boys. But like a lot of people, when they first start out, we were very young when we got married. I was 23. I had all 4 kids by the time I was 30. So, you know, we had those regular struggles that people have. We had those financial struggles. We had the struggles with children. I had lost a baby I was carrying. We'd been through a lot, right? So at that point in time, in 2005, all of that was behind us, and we had just turned a corner where this deployment was going to be our last great hurdle. You know, we had put everything together. My career was taking off. Even while I had all those kids, I had become a real estate agent. Market was booming. I would take all these kids on showings with me. You know, I'd lock myself in the room and make an appointment, you know, while the kids were running around. We just made it work. And so things were looking up for us in 2005. We had been through a lot already, and we were at our strongest point and just looking forward to the future as soon as this deployment was behind us.
Mm-hmm. And I read in your book how he took you out to dinner to break the news that he was deploying.
Yeah,
I love how they do.
They sabotaged me there. I'm like, are you kidding me with this crap? But you know, men, they're very smart, right? So they do things like that. I think it'll be a great idea to take her out to a public place and give her this awful news.
Right.
Boom.
I know. Mine first told me I had just had a friend pass away that week unexpectedly. So I'm grieving. I'm preparing for a funeral. And then my husband says, by the way, I'm deploying. And I thought, So I guess there's never a good time.
There's no good time to do. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's never, if it was a good day, it'll be a bad day. If it was a bad day, it'll be a worse day, you know, and that's something I think a lot of people can't really grasp. And it can be hard sometimes, I'm sure you can relate to this, to maintain your awareness of other people's lives, right? So maybe somebody will complain, oh, my husband went away with his buddies for the weekend and I have to care for this. Or my husband worked long hours and it's so hard. And you kind of want to be like, you're right, but
You just want
you can't because yeah, you just like take a sip of whatever you got and shut up, right? Because the rational side of you understands that, yes, that is hard no matter what, right? When you have this person there and then he's not there and you have to deal with it. And then the other side, the emotional side that's exhausted and strung out, just wants to rail. So it's constantly a balance. And when you're faced with deployment, and I imagine the same is true for law enforcement officers, first responders, spouses, all these, just the worry that goes into the everyday existence. Every moment you're carrying that around. You could be sitting and having a conversation with someone, but in the back of your head, it's like, oh my gosh, just constantly. So, that is it's a weight we all carry.
Agreed. And so it sounds like you had a very typical life as the family, young mother, young children, husband in the military, deploying. And of course, we always wonder in the back of our minds, well, what if? But you think that won't happen to me. But I think what happened to you was just so incredibly unexpected and shocking. Just the fact that your husband was there, I mean, barely there for days. And you two had already communicated, right? Once he landed in country, you had your chat.
He deployed on Memorial Day in 2005. So Memorial Day weekend was the last time that I saw him. Mm-hmm. And on the morning of June 7th, I'd done a video chat with him. He was in Iraq for 10 days, but on that base for like 3 or 4 days when he was killed. And so we had done a video chat and I had all 4 boys in with me and they all got to see their daddy and smile, and talk to him. But he was supposed to call me back that night. He was on base and I had just started to relax a little because it seemed like a safe base. I had seen him and Phil, the commanding officer, had both video chatted me earlier, and he was like smiling and he said, it's good here. Yes, there's this and yes, there's that, but I'm not leaving the base for another week and it's all good here. It's not really as bad, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, this will be okay. And so I complained to him. I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad you're good, but I'm so tired and this is so hard.
We all do.
And he, and all 4 kids here and there. And I had to go get the bus and I was getting the results of a medical test back that day. And so he was going to call me later that night. And I knew that he'd be able to call me because it was easy enough for him to do so from where he was. So I had been expecting nothing bad that day. So today I can relax, right? Whoops.
Of course. Yeah. And in your book, the Front Toward Enemy, the very first chapter, Barb just sent this to me this weekend. And I thought, let me flip through it, prepare for our interview. Mm-hmm. And by page 2 or 3, I was bawling and in tears. And then my fire alarm went off because our pizza, like something fell in the oven. I was like, So I kind of had this difficult moment. And I thought, you described so well. I could so easily put myself in your shoes at the moment you learned about your husband's passing. Can you share about what happened, how that played out for you?
Yeah, I can. And I have to say, you are probably the first military spouse, especially with a husband deployed, who has not just fled from me, because I represent your worst nightmare, right?
Oh.
So a lot of women sort of, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, but, I don't want to look. So hats off to you for going down this road.
Oh, no, of course.
But yes, it was. I had been up all night because he hadn't called me. And so I was worried, and I had had some very strange things happen to me the day before. Feelings where like I heard him talking to me or something hit me in the gut. And I'm like, something's not right. So I was up all night, and it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and the kids were, for some reason, still asleep because it was very rare at that time. And I hear this pounding on my front steps, and I hear the doorbell ring, and I go flying out there, and there are these men there to tell me. And as soon as you see them, you know why they're there. It was made very clear. We're a National Guard family, so not very well versed. I wasn't well versed in military life. My husband was a high school teacher. I was a real estate agent. I didn't live military. He did. I didn't. but I was well versed in that. So I knew why those guys were at the door. And I came running around the corner and these men were there, and I literally, it was like some force just slammed me back into the wall, and that was that. And so you kind of blank out. You don't really, you just hear little snippets of what they're saying. Ma'am, regret to inform you, after they had to come inside because I just like fell back against the wall. And like, Mrs. Allen, Mrs. Lewis Allen. I'm like, maybe if I don't tell them it's me, maybe they won't say it. But who else would it be? 6 o'clock in the morning in my house, right? So they came in, and they were as kind as they could be, and you could see that they were struggling themselves. That's not an easy job to have to come in and destroy somebody. But the very first information we got was incorrect. They said he'd been killed in his sleep. So I knew that wasn't right, because he was going to call me, and I knew it was easy for him to call me. So I'm like, no, that's not right. So then I had some hope. I'm like, oh, maybe it's not him, because he was supposed to call me. So maybe he was just injured or something, and so you just start thinking maybe, until you have to understand that, no, this is you. It's your turn. It's your turn. 6 months prior to that, I'd gone with Lou to the wake of a young man from his unit who'd been killed.
Oh.
Sergeant Kenneth Von Ram. And that was awful. I saw that widow standing by her husband's casket. I'm like, oh, hell no. And I mean, I was not a strong person. I was like, please don't do this to me. I'm like, you don't understand. I can't. She's doing great, but she's like a superwoman, and understand that you have to come back to me. So I was begging him, and he presented her the flag at her husband's funeral the next day. And 6 months later, I was there getting the flag. So it's just the way it happened for us.
Well, thank you so much for your sacrifice and your husband's sacrifice. I know you didn't sign up for that. That's the last thing you wanted. But I really appreciate you talking to me. I'm not going to run from you. I want to embrace you and support you. And I think that's what everyone else.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. So then this happened to you. You get this tragic news at 6 a.m. You've got 4 little boys. You probably I can't even imagine how this catapulted you into, suddenly you had all these questions to answer that you probably didn't know how to answer. Yeah. You had questions you wanted to ask that the military wasn't answering. And I understand, I don't know if I said this in my introduction, but the man who murdered your husband, after this long trial that you had to then endure after all the grief, he was acquitted. He was found not guilty. And I cannot imagine the time, the energy, the hopes you were hanging on that justice that just never came. What was it that you did that enabled you to put one foot in front of the other and keep fighting and making phone calls and trying to schedule meetings to see that your husband's murderer was found guilty? I guess my question is just how did you do it? Because I know this went on for what was it, 2.5, 3 years, the legal battle?
It was 3.5 years. It was a 3.5 year totality from the time he was killed. So when something like, I don't know how everyone else does it. I know that I, at that time, I didn't have these resiliency skills. I didn't have those coping skills. I had never had to tap into anything like that. And anything that had been difficult or sad, when I lost the baby I was carrying, when we had financial troubles, I turned to my husband and he carried me through. So this was my first experience where I didn't have that person who was going to be strong for me and, kind of pull me through. And I had these 4 little boys looking to me, and they deserved a mother, and I couldn't be there. So my first response was not a good one. I was very depressed. I was literally suicidal. I mean, I had those moments where, that moment where I'm standing there with the pills in my hand and I'm crying, and I feel like my kids would just be better off without me because I knew I would never be okay again. And, something like kind of punched me in the gut. It was like, no, I just hear this no in my head. And so I stayed, but then I became what I call passively suicidal, taking chances that I knew were dangerous and didn't care about. In one case, I got thrown from my horse that I had just got, this giant horse I got thrown from. I didn't care, and I was in the hospital. So I didn't deal with it well, is the answer at first. But I was very lucky because I had so many people who were there for me to either care for my children when I just couldn't breathe, or care for me in some cases. And people opened up their hearts and allowed me to move from here to there to there to there whenever I needed to. And when we found out that he'd been murdered by another soldier, didn't make any sense. I'm like, what? I'm sorry, what did you say? You know? But then I did the unhealthy thing. You have to find any reason to go forward, right? Any reason to get you to the next day is going to be where you grab to. I focused on revenge. I focused on hate, and I said, I'm living for revenge and I'm living for my children. And as soon as I find revenge and as soon as my kids don't need me anymore, I can go. But that was not a good thing to focus on, right? Because when you focus on something that you have no control over, you're just setting yourself up for disaster. When you place your conditional well-being on something you can't control, it's not a very safe place to land. So obviously that didn't work out for me because when that revenge fell through, when I didn't get to see him given the death penalty, I went down again. And so I had to rebuild again because I had to find a new purpose. So it wasn't going to be revenge on him, and it was going to be, accountability, because so many things went wrong in that court martial. So outrageous things. I had reached out to the widow, Terry Seifert. Her husband, Chris Seifert, was murdered by another soldier in 2003 in a case that my husband and I followed. And just before Lou was killed, her husband's killer, Hassan Akbar, had been given the death penalty.
Oh, wow.
So, and she was in the very same courtroom that we were in, and some of the same attorneys were involved. So wow. I reached out to her. I said, all you people around me are talking nonsense. Nobody's telling me the straight truth. I want to speak to someone who's been through it. Mm-hmm. And so Terry Seifert very graciously called me, and we've remained in touch to this day. And she sort of mentored me through that process. This is what you can expect next. So the only real truth I got was from Terry Seifert in those times, because she had walked that walk. But her trial went differently. Ours fell apart. So every time something fell apart in ours, she was like, oh no, that's not the way it's supposed to happen. So I would panic more and more. Oh, Terry, did that happen to you? No, that didn't happen. I'm like, so you could see disaster coming. Mm-hmm. But you're still not prepared for it when it does.
Well, and I appreciate your honesty, because this was one of my questions for you is, of course, now you're strong. I would describe you as strong, inspirational. You've got this voice, you're motivating people, you're helping others. But I know it wasn't always like that. Now there's the light at the end of the tunnel. You were very much in the tunnel. And I think anyone would be in your shoes. Anyone would think it would just be easier if I just died too. And then I wouldn't have to endure this pain. And I think that's very natural. Your feelings are so valid. And I'm so glad you found something to cling to. I knew you had your boys. And even the revenge and anger, yes, you can't stay and live there forever, but I think it served a purpose. And I'm hoping that other purposes are that now it's kind of put you in this, you have a platform and you've had a place now where you can help others who are grieving. You can, hopefully no one else will have to endure this sort of case again, but they can learn from yours. Can you please briefly explain the title of your book? Oops, sorry, I'm trying to get that.
Yeah. So I probably should have titled it something else. The people outside the military don't know what that is. Front toward enemy has a very literal and factual meaning for us, an implied meaning. Front toward enemy is what's inscribed on the front of a claymore mine. And the claymore mine is what was used to kill my husband. So in our case, and especially profound for us, because my husband's death is labeled non-hostile, because they say he wasn't killed by an enemy. So he doesn't get the Purple Heart. And I've been battling that for years, all right, that to change his death from non-hostile to hostile. But the government says he wasn't killed by an enemy. And so it was, murder, and that doesn't count. But I say any American soldier in a combat zone who willingly kills another American soldier has aided and abetted the enemy and is therefore an enemy. And both in my husband's case and in so many other cases, our case is not unique. It happens more often than you would think. There are many, many other documented cases of this happening, cases happening now, investigations. And in our case, Martinez was the guy's name. He had threatened the lives of the commanding officer hundreds and hundreds of times, all the way up to the inspector general of the unit, literally saying he's going to frag him. And nobody warned the commanding officer because it hadn't occurred to them that somebody would actually do that. They thought, look, this guy is pissed, he's mad, he's crazy. But at the end of the day, he's an American soldier, and that's a line American soldiers don't cross. That's a very dangerous thought to have. And so part of my efforts are, if somebody labeled him an enemy, I researched tons of other cases like this and very similar warning signs in all of these cases. And if people were just taught this, they could respond to those warning signs earlier. And, my husband wouldn't have been killed, and Phil Esposito wouldn't have been killed, and so many others would still be alive if these warning signs were taught. I don't think it's shameful to admit that people get into the military or maybe devolve as they're serving and become a threat, right? Because that's human. They're human beings. To deny that denies the very human nature of everybody who wears the uniform. We're people underneath it, right? So by addressing that, you can correct it. And therefore, people like your husband and everybody serving knows, hey, oh my gosh, the government, the military, they've got my back. Because if somebody, I know that every man and woman I look at here is solid. Because if not, they're out, right? And so that's one less worry that everybody has to worry about. It makes the force stronger, keeps morale up. So it may be an unwinnable battle because I've been shut down so many times and it's just me against the government. But so that's part of my position.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just frankly astonished that they didn't take that seriously. That his mental health was clearly deteriorating. He might have been suffering PTSD. Right. He might have had his own suicidal tendencies.
No. He definitely was not. This was a guy who should not have gotten into the military in the first place. He had a sketchy history in the past. He had been stealing from supply and selling to Iraqis. So there was no PTSD. And I want to make that clear because that could be used as sort of a defense for him. He was just a bad guy, who shouldn't have been in there. And it happens. It doesn't mean that the military is full of bad people. The military is full of extraordinary people who should be protected from the few people who managed to wind their way in. And he was just one of the few who managed to wind their way in.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I feel like it could have all been prevented and avoided had his threats been taken.
Absolutely. Dozens of cases, dozens of moments where it could have been prevented. Yeah.
Wow. So
it was a little hard to live with.
I can imagine. I feel like that's probably the understatement of the year right there. I don't know. And I know you've been, it was what now, 13 years ago, and I know you still live with this.
Yeah.
Every day there's that shadow. But I also hope that every day there's still the wonderful memory and the legacy of your husband. And can you tell me a little bit about that with your 4 young boys? How old are they now? I know you said they were ages.
They're not so young anymore. Yeah, they're not so young. My oldest is 19 now. And he'll be home this week from his first year in college. And then I have an 18-year-old, and our next son will be 17 in July. And then our next son is now 14. So
many teenage boys. How do you do it?
No, there's not always tea in this mug, But
I am not either. They probably eat.
I joke around, that. Yeah. I joke around that I live in a frat house, right? Because that's just what it is. It's gross here. It's pretty gross here. I am now engaged to an awesome man that you got to meet quickly here before we started. He has a little boy as well. He also has a little girl. So I have one female ally in this. And she'll come up to me all the time. She'll be like, "It's okay, Barb. I got you. You look like you need a hug, Barb." I'm like, "Yes, thank you, Haley. That would be wonderful. Thank you." So
That's so excellent.
you just have to go with it. Yeah, you just got to go with it.
I can only imagine. So, do your oldest sons still have memories of your husband?
Very, very few, unfortunately. And this is something. One of the things, some things you manage to set aside, and some things you manage to not. You get good compartmentalizing. But one of the things that is the worst part for me is shortly before he left, I have this vivid memory. I know what he was wearing. I know how he was standing. I know how the sun was hitting his face and how he looked up, and we talked. And because he would not talk about what could happen. He didn't want to hear about, or even engage in conversation with me about something that happened to him. But one time he kind of slipped for a minute, and he's like, "No, I have to come back." He worked so hard. He was a full-time teacher, and he was a coach of sports, and he was in the National Guard, and he would help his buddies out, and he would support me while I was going out to do my career and do my things. So he was just constantly working, all for the day when he could come back and enjoy all of that with these kids. So he, kind of looked up and he said, "No, it would be so terrible if these kids grew up not remembering me and never really knowing how much I love them and how hard I work for them." And so when I combine that memory with the knowledge that he wasn't killed right away, he had a couple of hours of consciousness to process what was happening to him and to begin talking about not coming home to me and the boys. And I put those two together. That can kind of, and that's the absolute worst part of it for me, to know that. So they have very few, the two oldest one have very few memories of him, the youngest none. And that obviously it upsets them. It's awful. It's just something that we have to deal with. He was killed about 2 weeks before Father's Day, so there we are again. And it was just, we were instantly just thrust into this situation, that situation. And it just never has relented. It doesn't relent. You just have to decide that you're going to do it. That's part of why I started writing this book. I started writing a journal for my kids because I knew, I was like, "Oh boy, Mama's not doing well. I'm blowing this. I can't. So I wanted to write a journal so that my kids would one day be able to read it when they're having all these discussions like, "Oh my gosh, remember how crazy Mom used to be? Do you remember this? Remember that?" I'd be like, "Look, read this journal and maybe you'll understand a little bit, right?" But as the case developed and as I started to learn more and I did my own investigating and interviewing witnesses, and then I got my hands on the guilty plea, which the government denied existing. The government lied to us about the guilty plea, didn't tell us about it, suppressed it during the trial. Then he was acquitted, and then they lied to my face saying that they had it. I got a copy. I gave it to the New York Times. They ran it on the front page. I was like, no, I'm writing this book. I am writing this story because there's just so much. And I hoped it could be used as a tool to educate people across, a lot of disciplines, but especially in the military and especially in the judicial system, into how the victims should be treated. And to anybody who may potentially be on a panel in the military court-martial system, to maybe have a little more compassion for the families than some of those panel members did. And, just an eye-opening from both sides. So that's how it evolved into a book.
Wonderful. And this is the book, Front Toward Enemy, yeah. On Amazon. And then this even inspired your educational direction, right? Your degree that you received after this?
Yeah, so I thought, a lot of people, and I knew I was off the rail. I was like a little almost manic during the trial. It was so awful. I would joke instead of crying. I thought it was weak to cry in public. So I would joke with my friends. I have one of my very good friends, Stephen Razor, was a JAG officer. He was friends with my husband, and he stepped in to kind of befriend me, and he was assigned to me during the case. So he was with me a lot, and I would just joke, anything to find a laugh so I didn't cry in front of people, right? And that wasn't understood by the panels, misinterpreted by a lot of people. But also, I knew, and then afterwards I was just filled with this rage and this anger, and I was crying. And of course the news shows, they love that. They
Oh.
love the emotional weeping widow. So it was, widow slay rage was the headline somewhere in the New York Post or something. And, that was fed into it. And so I was like, oh, no, I need to simmer myself down. And before that, I knew that. So I just started taking the course, the master's in criminal justice, because I thought I would be a victim liaison and help other people through the criminal justice system, because I saw all these gaps in the services available. So I had to finish that degree while I was writing my book, and I wrote so much. I blew out the ligaments in my arms, and I had to have surgery in my arms.
I've never heard of that happening. I thought my career.
Yeah, I mean,
realized writing could.
No, it's dangerous, man. First, it started with carpal tunnel, and then I got the shot for that.
Yeah.
And then I adapted, and the way I adapted, I just tore all the ligaments in my arms, and I got one surgery done first, and the doctor's like, you really need to not write for a while, or your other arm is definitely going to go. And I wrote another book and blew out my other arm, and so I had both arms operated on. But when you're driven to do that, your drive exceeds the pain, and so you use that as your purpose. And I had to write it. So I did the writing while I'm getting the degree.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you say a quote? Right, because I can't sing, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I write because I can't sing. It's true. If I could sing, I would, but no, I'm like banned from that, and for good reason. But yeah, so
that tickles me. Well, so I do love that you found a purpose, and you found something for yourself, and you found a way to cope. So what I want to talk about next is your other book, How to Woo a Widow.
Yay! I never get to talk about this one. Oh,
yeah. Have at it. Because there is a time where you want to find something for yourself. You're still alive. You still want a partner, companionship. I mean, you had that, and you've said how your husband was your rock, and then it's just gone. And after the grief, after you learn to cope and everything, that need for human companionship still exists. So can you tell me a little bit about what it was like stepping into the dating world when you decided to get your feet wet again?
Well, do you remember a few minutes ago when I said I didn't handle it well at first?
Yes.
Part of that involved this. I was broken, and I had 4 little boys, and I always thought, I'm not qualified to do this. They need a man around. And then, I was too proud to maybe go to my family and ask for help, and other people that I was close to and loved. It was in a phase where people were kind of turning on me, right, and judging them, and things were happening, and I felt completely isolated and completely alone and completely betrayed by a lot of people I was close to, which made the conditions ripe for somebody to step in. So this big, strong man I moved next door to, who is a good person in his own right, but was not at the point in his life where he should have been, getting involved in a relationship any more than I was. But we were 2 broken people at the same point in our lives, and we got together way too soon, which only served to, make a lot of other things worse. So ended that one a while down the road, probably a year and a half or something down the road. But it had already gotten further than it should have got. So then I said, oh no, I'm going to do this right this time. I just want to have fun. That had ended in such a terrible way, and I felt like such a jerk for so many reasons. But I said, no, now I'm there, and now I'm going to do this right. So I hop online, and I go on to Match, and I said, nobody's going to want a widow anyway, so I'm going to have plenty of time to just sit back and take my time with this and have some fun. And I had to go. My kids were still very young. I'm like, but if I'm sitting home Friday night, when I can go out, I just want someone to go to the movies with, or maybe take a hike with, or something. I don't want to be alone all the time.
No.
But no, dude, men are crazy. I hop online and I put this right out there. I'm like, look, I'm a widow and I got 4 kids. And if you can't handle that, I get it, but please don't ping me. I'm like, if you can't put a picture up of yourself, don't even bother messaging me because you don't have what it takes. I mean, like, not nice. And I'm like, I'm going to have all this time because who is going to message me? Man, my inbox was slammed.
Wow.
And like to the point where I would actually start taking notes of who I spoke with so that if I spoke with them again, I could reference that conversation and instead of referencing somebody else's conversation.
Wow. They lined up.
I'd never dated before, right? My husband was like my first boyfriend. I didn't have experience. You know, he's my first love. He was my first everything. And so I didn't know what I was doing. So it was very overwhelming. And I thought I was strong and I thought I was okay, but I was still very vulnerable and very rattled from events that had happened in my life and very unclear. So just looking, I was like, okay, now I want to be better. And I thought the fact that I wanted to be better meant I was better, but it wasn't. So I was prime target for a predator who wound up weaving his way into my life very quickly and doing extraordinary damage, huge damage to myself and my children. And it went on for way too long. You know, I mean, I've really had so many experiences, right? This guy turned out, he was an addict and a narcissistic personality as well. So he left me emotionally decimated, financially decimated in the very real sense of the term. So that's probably my biggest regret, the harm I let him do to my children and me, but mostly when your children suffer because I invited this person into my life, they suffered. And that's awful to live with. But before anybody gets like completely down on it, when you go into it with the right mindset, right? So I came out of that and I was like, oh, hell no. But the one good thing that came out of that was for the first time I realized, you know what? I actually want my life. It was the first time I was like, oh, no, you don't. I'm like, I didn't go through everything I went through just to let you take me down. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you don't. No, you won't. And that was the first time I actually took a stand in my own life and my own well-being and said, never again. It was a big turning point for me where I was like, never again will I compromise one day of my life. Never again will I invite disaster into my children's lives. Never again will I let my children see me be weak and preyed upon and used. Never again for a lot of things. And, you know, I made that vow to myself. I said, whatever comes, I am now taking my life back. I am in charge of my life. No one else is going to dictate how I do it or how I don't do it. I'm going to rebuild no matter what it takes. And I'm going to get the most out of every single day because that's what I deserve. That's what my husband died for. That's what my children need to see. So that was a huge turning point for me. And when you change your mindset, when you change your mindset and you put out that positive, like warrior vibe almost, but not like in the angry warrior that I was in the past. In the past, I was like, up yours and up your, you know, I'm going to get you and you and you and you, right? And in the past, and now I was just like, here I am, who would like to join me, you know, kind of thing. And everything changed. I got the career I needed. I met this amazing man, who now I work with and now I'm engaged to and now does this work with me. So everything changed. So it does have a happy ending in that sense, but you got to do it right. You got to do it right. You have to do it for you. And you have to not compromise yourself. And if somebody gives you that bad feeling, if there's like a little, something doesn't add up, it doesn't. So run.
That is,
you know,
right. That is
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I loved it. Well,
long answers. I know.
Your book up here again. Was there anything you wanted to say about the book since you don't get to talk about it often? I'm guessing on a true story, some of your dating experiences.
You know what? No, I actually didn't use my own experiences in there. I used Thank you, Michelle. I can see the comments now just popping up.
Yes, I'm making them
So I
as you talk.
use I have a big network now of military widows as well who are close friends, and so I use like feelings, overall feelings, and I created situations in that book to teach what we go through, in the process of grief, anybody goes through. So I was able to craft this situation. There's one true story in there, dealing with one of the sisters and her kid in potty training. That was mine. But
Now
it was crazy. But it was fun, and I realized A Friend's Worst Enemy was necessarily serious and very intense, and people are left like, oh my God, like just wrecked after reading it. So I didn't want that to be my only representation of me, because that's not who I am or where I'm stuck. How to a Widow is more like Steel Magnolias themed, kind of fun. I love it.
Oh, I cannot wait to read it. Thank you so much for sending it my way. And I'll think of you when I get to the So I love it. You're not stuck, and this isn't who you are. This was one part of your life. It's just one chapter. So can you tell me about what you are doing now? Who are you now? Tell me about your current relationship, your work on American Snippets. I'd love just everyone out there who's watching us to know that you have come out on top, you're helping others, and what are you doing today? What are you doing now?
Thank you. So one of the parts, when I turned that corner, I realized I had to do a long, hard look at myself and my choices. And those choices involved a lot of who I surrounded myself with, what I fed myself with every time I hopped online, or every time I vegged out in front of the TV or picked up a book. I was, constantly drawn to, these terrible stories, or I was seeing these terrible stories pop up across the news, and those were getting all the attention. One bad thing happens and the media lights up with it, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I looked around my own life too. I said, I also know amazing people everywhere. Why aren't these stories being told? Because when I meet these people, I feel better and I think differently and I behave differently, and different things happen in my life as a result. And I said, and then people started to, it just seemed like there was a wave of divisiveness in the country and people were giving up on our country. And I was like, oh, no. Too many people give too much. Your family is going through too much. My family has gone through too much. And across the decades, I'm like, our families don't go through what we go through, so people can give up on each other and give up on our country. I'm like, we're going to take this back, And so that's why we said, well, what about if we combat this bad news with the good news? And not only do we bring them the good news, we try to support those people doing those amazing things. And so we're going to reverse that wave. We're going to just take that. It doesn't matter if your political views are wrong. No, I'm just kidding. If we did, we'll still help you. You just can't be an asshole. I'm sorry. But,
yes.
Like one of my very best friends, who became my best friend because she was friends with that person I mentioned I let into my life. So we shouldn't have stayed friends to begin with, but she's a great friend now. So just the nature of that relationship, she and I have completely different views on pretty much everything in the world, but we engage in those, in a humorous way, in a respectful way. I'm like, look, so why can't the rest of our country do that? Nobody says you have to agree with me, even though you should, right? But I'm just kidding. But, so even the people we profile may not agree with us politically, but they do extraordinary things. Amazing things. And these are examples of how everybody can get through. There's no excuses. Whatever has happened to you, you still have a choice over that day, how you're going to address it. And I shouldn't say, and I know there are, maybe people who are like literally in the last moments or whatever, but, take those examples aside. The majority of us are lucky enough to have that day and to have that choice. how we can spend that day, how we can spend the next day, and what we can do with the voice that we have. And so by featuring these people, I mean, they lift me up. And so now I get to surround myself with these stories. Micah Fink, the Navy SEAL who takes people on wild Mustangs out in the mountains and does extraordinary things with them. We have a cancer survivor, 8-year-old cancer survivor who donates toys to children's wards. Now we have Vietnam heroes. We have World War II heroes. We have celebrities. We have entrepreneurs who give back millions. I mean, just, it's a reminder that this country is packed with amazing people. Whatever we think about the government, whatever decisions the government makes, what we feel get right or get wrong, that doesn't have to determine how we live our lives. You know, we still have that choice to live our lives. And so that's why we do what we do at American Snippets, and we're creating that community where we can link people with resources. You know, if people have trouble getting out of their own way, they can call me and I'm going to work with them. If people if they're a combat veteran, they know a combat veteran who struggles, hop on our site because we have people who can help you. And if you don't know the story exactly, send us an email. We'll send you the link to those people who will help you. And, you know, we're just going to do that because we want to spread it forward. And those people will send you a link to those people. So why don't we all just work as one energy instead of just sitting around complaining about our country, or complaining about our situations? Let's just take it back. Let's just do something and stop with the excuses. So that's what we do at American Snippets. Our tagline is positivity, possibility, and patriotism. I believe with those 3 elements, you can overcome anything if you apply those values into your life. So that's what we're doing.
I love it.
I keep giving these long answers.
Oh, I give the long answers too. You'll find out when you interview me next week.
Yeah.
No, I love it though, because you're right. If anyone can say this, it's you. You have a choice and you chose it, and you're promoting positivity. And I can't say enough wonderful things about that, because it is changing our mindset. You said that early on in the interview. Once you change your mindset, everything falls into place. Everything changes. It's wonderful that you're doing this work. You're supporting our veterans. You've connected with other Gold Star wives. You're helping spread the word on grief and overcoming it and finding something for yourself and staying strong. And I just find your work very inspiring. So I thank you so, so much. Now, if people want to learn more about you, Barb, where should they go?
Definitely go right to American Snippets. So you can find me on Instagram. I am not like an Instagram jammy. I'm literally doing it organically, right? So if you want to come follow me on Instagram, come follow me, right? But so yes, I'm there, and we're on American Snippets is where you can find out more about us. And I just super quickly too, if anybody does know, in particular now we're focused on Gold Star wives. We will be opening this up to military spouses as well. Entrepreneurial and empowerment retreat that we do, offering entrepreneurial avenues and huge, great experiences. People come together. We start off with a self-defense class, and then we do entrepreneurial resources. It's a weekend together. We're planning our next one for the fall. So if you know someone who you feel could use that boost in mindset, or maybe access to some entrepreneurial resources, they can check us out too. The story about our first one is on there. It's free. We don't charge anyone for it to come. We do it through sponsorship. We just do it because it's a need, and it's something we're trying to help fill. So everybody that participates does so because they want to help. So it doesn't cost anyone anything except for they just have to get to New York, and then they can come attend this program for free.
That is
so. I'll send you information about that too when it comes out.
Please do. We'd be happy to share that with our audience. And I'm interested myself. I think that sounds fantastic and right up my alley personally. So thank you so much. Thank you. You're supporting other spouses.
No, thank you so much.
I look at what you've endured, and now you seem to have filled your cup, and you're just pouring it out and filling everyone else's. So thank you so much.
That's the goal. And I'm looking forward to having you on our show next week.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Jackie Toops with Army Wife 101 was interviewing today Barb Allen. You'll be able to watch the video live on our Facebook. And please stay tuned for more. We'll be sending some more information out about Barb and her work if you're interested in her books, American Snippet and The Retreat. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.